Election day is almost here. Months of campaigning, debates, and ads have brought us to this moment. Our local elections with national attention. An unprecedented three-way race for New York City mayor.
Too often we think of affordability as a young person's problem of whether you can build a life here. But there are so many who are asking themselves whether they can keep a life here.
This election is the choice between capitalism and socialism.
I look at Zoran Mandami and Andrew Cuomo as a double-headed hydra because they're both pro-criminal.
And across the Hudson, one of the closest races in New Jersey's history.
I'm going to focus on serving the people of New Jersey. That has always been my North Star, and that is what I'm going to continue to fight to do.
It's time for a change, and a whole lot of people across the state of New Jersey feel the same way, and it's not just Republicans.
A razor-thin margin separates Democrat Mikey Sherrill and Republican Jack Ciattarelli. In our final episode before Election night, we're breaking down the latest polls, the final push for votes, and a look at what lies ahead. PIX on Politics starts right now.
This is PIX on Politics with Dan Mannarino.
And welcome to a special edition of PIX on Politics, everybody. I am Dan Mannarino, and here we are. We made it to the final weekend before Election Day. Oof. The start of these races felt like an eternity ago, and today we have two panels. There's a lot to talk about. One focused on New Jersey, the other New York City. So let's start there. The race for New York City mayor leaning heavily in Zoran Mamdani's favor. The Democratic nominee surpassing that key number, the 50% mark, with Cuomo and Sliwa at 25 and 21% respectively. PIX 11's polling with Emerson College in the Hill showed just 4% of New Yorkers at this moment have yet to decide who gets their vote. So joining me for the New York City portion of the show, senior political reporter Henry Rossoff for PIX 11, of course, the city reporter Katie Honan, City Hall reporter for the Daily News Josie Stratman, and Democratic strategist Trip Yang. So great to have all of you here for our final before Election Day. Here we are. We made it. Okay, it felt like an eternity because of the fact that primaries are now in June, so you get this longer runway. Here we are, Mamdani hitting this number of 50%, right? Which many are looking at saying it's an unbeatable number. There were a lot of polls that came out this week with Zoran Mamdani far and away the front runner. Do you think there's going to be a surprise on election night, Henry?
It would take really something very special. I mean, there's been a lot of focus on older New Yorkers who are turning out in droves during the early portion of this primary, with some sort of wish casting from the Cuomo camp that means the electorate is significantly changing. Mm-hmm. No doubt there are more people and perhaps more people over the age of 50, but even those numbers are polling showing is breaking ever so slightly toward Mr. Mamdani. Mm-hmm. We know the young folks are going to come out, and remember, people who come to college here may have registered here between the primary and the general election, so that young surge from Mamdani might be even bigger than it was.
Yeah, that's the talking point from the Cuomo campaign, right? They were talking about college kids in particular. They could still vote by mail, but there has been this big push earlier in the week. Polls mattered to the Cuomo campaign. Here we are at the end of the week. Polls don't matter to the campaign. You were there at a couple of his events this week. What were you hearing from the Cuomo campaign?
They are really pushing that idea that, if you believe the polls, then sure. The campaign is really trying to continue to instill fear in what would happen in New York City if Zoran Mamdani becomes the mayor. Cuomo was on the radio this morning discussing that people would just move out in droves. He was talking about what he called the toxic campaign feeling, but without acknowledging how he's been contributing to it. So I think the campaign, we have a couple of days to Election Day, and we'll see how things can go continually till Tuesday, because I fear it might just get worse from especially their side. Yeah,
the Cuomo campaign just today, as we're taping on Friday morning, put out, Melissa DeRosa, one of the campaign surrogates, said that she didn't like that Zoran Mamdani was going negative in ads, and then there was a tweet from Andrew Cuomo going negative on Zoran Mamdani. So when you look at the campaigns, here we are, right? You're the Democratic strategist. How'd they do?
So I'll say this. When we look at polls professionally in our consulting strategy business, you often look at favorables to unfavorables. How a candidate does with the electorate, if they're well-liked or not, that is actually a precursor to the actual horse race, the polling horse race. So, one, shout out to PIX 11 Emerson, because in the primary, you guys came the closest to coming to the primary result. But this week
Cuomo called it an outlier.
At the time, and he's calling this one an outlier too.
Yeah. Cuomo's been wrong more than once. But I'll say this, even in the best polls for Cuomo, there was a Q poll this week that had him only down 10 points. When you look at his unfavorables, he is minus 20 with the general election electorate. Mamdani, on the other hand, he is positive territory in almost every single election poll, simply because most registered voters in New York City are registered Democrats. So even if you take the rosiest of circumstances that Cuomo's only down 10 points as opposed to 25 points, it is looking like it's a good news for Zohran Mamdani.
Yeah, and it comes down to demographics, right, Josie? I mean, you take a look at what Cuomo's really been going after. He said that where he made his fatal flaw in the primary was not going after the youth vote, but I didn't see him really go after the youth vote this go around. He still was going after black voters and the plus over 50 population. In our last poll, it showed that was kind of going toward Zohran Mamdani.
Right. Yeah, Zohran Mamdani has certainly won over his fair share. I think close to 50% of older voters.
Yeah.
And while Cuomo has he's had a couple events where he's hosted evenings, like young people for Cuomo type events, but that hasn't been a major push for him. And I mean, maybe he's kind of hedging his bets here. He knows that older voters are people who continue to turn out in local elections. I know today he's campaigning in Brighton Beach among older, mainly Russian voters who tend to lean more conservative. He's trying to get Republicans, older conservative voters, and he's hoping they can almost mirror what happened in the primary with younger voters rushing to support Mamdani. He's hoping the same can happen with older voters here on Tuesday.
And it has to do with the numbers we're seeing for early turnout, right? And we're 8 times the number we were 4 years ago.
A little bit closer to 5. We had that rainy day that really did.
Oh, yes, right. So we're zeroing in on like 400,000 early votes at this taping, right? And Cuomo's saying, well, it's a different group of people who are voting early this go around. He's hoping those numbers are going to go to him.
Well, this is just anecdotal, but when we saw the surge of early voters, particularly voters over the age of 55, which is how the Board of Elections breaks it down, I went on a mission and interviewed voters over the age of 55 at various early voting locations. So again, anecdotal, not scientific, but many of them said, I don't know, I guess I'll give the kid a shot, meaning Mamdani. And so it's not a straight line between you're of a certain age and you're going to vote for Cuomo. I think there is a general feeling, especially among Democrats, and the city is vast majority Democrats, especially after the era of Biden and during the era of Trump, that new, fresh change is necessary. And I think you're seeing that in this Democrat-heavy electorate.
Yeah.
One other point I wanted to make, the Cuomo campaign was for weeks, whether it was them or people surrounding them, like the John Catsimatidis, pushing Curtis Lee with a Republican to drop out, presuming, and I think wrongfully assuming, that if Curtis Lee were dropped out, all of the votes, or even a large percentage of Curtis Lee's votes, would go to Andrew Cuomo. Right. There was a poll this week that showed that if Curtis Lee were dropped out, which at this point, why even ask? Early voting began, he's on the ballot, and there's no way he's dropping out. More of the votes went to Mamdani. So I think this is the question that we've asked the Cuomo campaign. Instead of calling on people to drop out, what are you doing to meet voters where they are? And we don't see what I was out last night until very late for me. Zohran Mamdani was doing a midnight press conference. Before that, he met with taxi drivers at LaGuardia Airport, hospital workers at Elmhurst Hospital. He went to Kebab King in Jackson Heights and spoke about these late night and overnight graveyard shift workers who he says are largely ignored. So you see an energy around his campaign and the ideas he's putting forth. You do not see Andrew Cuomo meeting with people on the street like the way that we see Curtis Lee and Zohran Mamdani doing.
Before that, he literally, Mamdani, sat down and painted with seniors for a substantial period of time. Today, as we're speaking, he's literally dancing in a senior center with seniors. So, you see the effort and frankly, a sort of joyous energy we've seen from him throughout this whole campaign.
Yeah, and that is the right point, that the Cuomo campaign really anticipated that if Curtis Lee were to drop out, that those voters would go to him. Curtis isn't dropping out, but that necessarily, to Katie's point, isn't the case.
Absolutely right. Look, the pathway for Cuomo is very narrow and it's straightforward. It's very outer borough voters. Think Bayside, Queens, Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, Staten Island, homeowners, pro-Israel voters. He'll pick up his share of older Black and Latino voters, but most Black and Latino voters are going to go with the Democratic nominee. And one of the final things I'll say is that in order for Cuomo to actually get the math to win this general election, he probably needs a majority of Republican voters. He needs to win independents. He probably needs 40% of registered Democrats.
Yeah.
I could see him winning independent voters, but for him to win 40% of Democrats against a coalesced Democratic Party, Mamdani, a majority of Republicans against Sliwa, that is really hard to do.
Okay, I want to talk about, we've had a lot of ups and downs along this race. You guys have been there for all of them. But one that was really bizarre this week was in the London Times about a Bill de Blasio that wasn't the actual Bill de Blasio, the former mayor of New York City, who was interviewed, and it made it sound like it was a Bill de Blasio going against Zohran Mamdani, but it ended up being a Bill de Blasio from Long Island, right?
Right. I mean, a really hilarious saga to this whole already crazy election cycle. It turns out this Times of London reporter had emailed a Long Island Bill de Blasio, big D, one word. And he played along because I think he was getting lots of hate mail through the years. And he said, you know what, now's my time. And he used ChatGPT to type out a response that was very critical of Mamdani's plan. Obviously, the former mayor is a huge ally.
Did you talk to him?
Mamdani.
The Long Island Bill de Blasio?
Oh, no, I didn't. The real one doesn't call me back, but I didn't speak to either Bill de Blasio. But the whole story is very bizarre, and I think as journalists, it frightened me. As a reporter, we'll blame the editor, because why didn't the editor check that it's the correct Bill de Blasio?
Don't just email.
I'll just say, just a shout out, I'm not a reporter, but shout out to the New York City Press Corps, because you could never pull this off with our reporters here in New York City.
No.
Like Katie, Josie, everyone would know who the real Bill de Blasio is.
Henry, yes.
Yeah. Henry as well, right? We got pros here in New York City.
If I got that one wrong, I think I wouldn't be here.
I just, on the ballot also, I know it's gotten lesser play. All the city council races are at play. Also the DA of Manhattan, and that's the one that's kind of flown under the radar, DA Alvin Bragg on the ballot as well. Seems like he's going to win again.
Yeah, not really a contest here. I mean, he says he wasn't, specifically going after Donald Trump. This was a talking point when he won 4 years ago, but certainly prosecuting Donald Trump didn't hurt his chances here in New York City. He doesn't really have a particularly serious challenger. I don't think that is a race to watch, frankly, on election day.
Henry, you are sticking around to talk about New Jersey. Josie, great to have you here. Katie, we'll talk to you about ballots in a few moments. And Tripp, great to see you as always, okay? Next up, everybody, from New York to New Jersey, where another race has widespread attention and national implications. Mikey Sherrill and Jack Ciattarelli vying to become the next governor of the Garden State, and every vote crucial, with just 1 percentage point separating the two. Our New Jersey panel, when we come back, Picks on Politics is back in 2 minutes.
You're watching Picks on Politics with Dan Mannarino.
Welcome back to Picks on Politics, everybody. So let's talk New Jersey now, where the race for governor is pretty much a virtual tie. Picks up its polling with Emerson College showing a single percentage point separates Democrat Mikey Sherrill, Republican Jack Ciattarelli. Just 2% of voters there remain undecided. And when those few undecided voters were pushed to choose a candidate, those votes split between the two candidates, with Mikey Sherrill winning by 2 points. Let's get right to our panel now. Senior political reporter Henry Rossoff is back with us, along with New Jersey reporter Jim Vassell and former New Jersey State Assembly member John Wisniewski. So great to have all three of you here. So let's talk about the poll numbers first and foremost, right? Razor-thin majority here. And I'm not really surprised by this, Henry, when you look at it because of how Jack Ciattarelli did the last go-round. But what do you make of the numbers?
A really competitive campaign, and something at this point I'm watching that I think viewers need to be aware of is how many Democratic votes Sherrill is saying she has in the mail. And so if these polls and other polls like them are indicative of how close this race is, and you look 4 years ago and it passes the smell test, then you very much could be looking at this sort of red mirage effect of Ciattarelli, and this is what happened 4 years ago to an extent, looking very strong on election night, and then it's a matter of how many of those mail-in ballots come through for Sherrill. So it could be a hold your breath moment. I would honestly be surprised if we had a winner on election night, although it's not outside the realm of possibility. So it is that close, Dan.
It's a very interesting race, John, when you look at this, because you have a number of mayors of towns who are Democrats that have come out and support the Republican Jack Ciattarelli. What does that mean? And New Jersey is a very interesting state because it goes back and forth between Republicans and Democrats.
I think it's important to put it in context. There are some Democratic mayors and council members that have endorsed Jack Ciattarelli, but when you have a state with 550 some municipalities and you've got 8 or 10, it's really a drop in the bucket. And a lot of it talks about local issues, not about statewide policy.
So, Jim, you're out there, and you're on the campaign trail, you're hearing from voters. We look at the poll, we see, of course, housing affordability is a big one. What are you hearing from people on the ground?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, I think about half of voters who we were polling see taxes, property taxes specifically, and inflation and jobs as the big issue. And what I thought was interesting was only about 11% saw housing affordability. Which is something that pops out to me because a lot of what I'm hearing on the ground is about affordable housing, something that, of course, both candidates have talked about. But a lot of people my age specifically, have tell me about the difficulty they have in being able to afford a home. You know, so I just thought that was interesting.
It's amazing how much the noise of the campaign falls by the wayside when people really search themselves for what matters to them. There was a lot of talk about Cheryl's military record at one point. There was a lot of talk after the second debate in particular about Chitterelli's publishing ties to the pharmaceutical industry. But what are people voting on? Their property taxes, the cost at the grocery store. It'd be very interesting to see what people make of this.
And energy bills, too.
Energy bills, yeah, good one.
And Mikey's really talked about that as part of her campaign.
Yeah, and and we're now looking at what's exactly playing out in terms of who Mikey Sherrill is bringing in. She's bringing in the so-called big guns, right? We have former President Obama campaigning with her this Saturday. We had Pete Buttigieg that was in town. So when you look at this, John, right, and you're seeing her bring in these big power players right now, is it showing that as a typical campaign, or is this, I need the help?
Well, I think every campaign pulls out all the stops at the end, and I'm sure Jack Ciattarelli will be doing the same thing. She's
With
relying
Donald
on
Trump?
Well, you know, he's gotten really close. He said he can't think of a thing that he's done that he disagrees with, so that's going to hurt him in New Jersey politics.
And you guys are going to be covering those events, but this is something very much that's going to have national implications, right? We're looking at this in terms of specifically New Jersey and Virginia and how President Trump may use this race moving forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, President Trump's approval in our polling that you were showing at the top of this segment is about 45%. Considering where he's at nationally, that would beat his national average. This is very much a referendum on President Trump, and very much a referendum because of Chitterelli's strategy, as John just mentioned, hugging the president so much during this cycle. It's going to bear out in these swing districts in 2026. How close can you get if you're a Mike Lawler in coming up in the primary? If you're one of these other swing Republicans coming up next year in 2026, huge lessons to be learned.
And to revisit the Obama visit planned for the weekend, that's pretty significant because Dan Cassino, our friend and political professor over at FDU, said the last time this happened was with Corzine when former President Bill Clinton came to stump for him, and he ended up losing.
That was the last time a former president
Former
came.
president, correct. And that was 2009. So.
Right. So what does that mean? What does that
Well,
say?
it means that there aren't that many former Democratic presidents at the point in time when there's a person running for governor.
But what does it say? What does it say that while he is Jack Ciattarelli is giving the president a grade of an A, he hasn't said, "Come campaign with me."
No, he hasn't, and for obvious reasons, because the brand that Donald Trump sells is not the typical New Jersey Republican brand, and now Jack's got to do the job of distancing himself from the guy he embraced in the primary.
And New Jersey also hasn't had two back-to-back New Jersey governors.
Well, I don't think that's really a big metric. It depends on who the candidates are. And I think right now we have an excellent candidate in Mikey Sherrill, and I think that Jack, while I understand the point he did with endorsing Donald Trump or getting Donald Trump's endorsement, in the primary that mattered. In the general, I think that hurts.
Yeah, Jim, I just want to briefly talk to you. I know we're paying all the attention to the race for governor, but there is a big race in Jersey City as well. A lot of candidates. You spoke to all of them.
All seven.
All seven of the candidates.
Wow.
One of them being a former governor, Jim McGreevey, right?
Sure.
This is expected to potentially go to a runoff.
Runoff, correct. And, you know, really this, you mentioned 7 candidates. I think that the 3 that are, as John and I were discussing off camera, you know, we have O'Day, who's the Hudson County Commissioner, you know, former Governor Jim McGreevey, and then James Solomon, who's on City Council. You know, and the other candidates certainly have great plans and visions for Jersey City. But, you know, the candidates have told me they see this as a nonpartisan election. They're all Democrats, of course, but that's what they've described to me as a nonpartisan.
And talk to folks, because I think people would be interested to know at home, how would a runoff work? Was it 2, was it 3, or what do you need to get to avoid it? Or
Not quite sure on that, but
Top two.
Top two.
Top two.
Got
And
it,
so,
yeah.
you know, one thing's clear: on election night, nobody will be the presumptive mayor. There'll be 2 people that will be fighting it out, and somebody's going to be looking for the loser's support to get those votes over on their side.
And much like that race, the governor's race, you know, as Henry alluded to earlier, we may be going to bed on Tuesday night, not knowing who.
Yeah, what's very interesting is we have a former governor of New York running for mayor of New York City, a former governor of New Jersey running for mayor of Jersey City.
And neither of them may win.
And neither of them may win. Very true.
I would say neither of them will win.
There you go. You heard it here first. Henry, Jim, and John, thank you both for being, all 3 of you for being here. Henry's sticking around to talk about ballots when we come back. Behind the ballot, the 6 measures that New Yorkers can weigh in on, 5 relating to affordable housing, why these initiatives have local leaders split. We'll be right back.
You're watching PIX on Politics with Dan Mannarino.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So let's talk about it. 6 ballot proposals for New Yorkers to vote on in addition to the candidates. A few of them have to do with affordable housing. So back with me, Henry Rossoff and Katie Honan. Quick explainer, Henry, on what exactly the 3 that relate to housing are.
Yeah, so one essentially expedites building by cutting out some control of the council. Another one expedites modest buildings below 45 feet. A third creates kind of this appeals board for the remaining power that the council has left, allows the mayor, the speaker of the city council, and the pertinent borough president to sort of override some of the council's authority. So it really goes after council authority in the interest of moving projects forward much more quickly.
We've gone back and forth on this, and we've asked Zoran Mamdani how he's going to vote. That became a big moment because he said he wasn't sure yet. A lot of the candidates are saying yes or no. The council saying heck no. Why?
It takes away their power, like Henry said. It takes away some of their authority in deciding the land use decisions in their district. They say that the local council member, they are elected, they should not be removed from the decision-making of what kind of land use decisions are made in their districts. But the point is, you look at council districts around the city, a community board member, a city council member, that's another ULURP process, could say, we don't want this project and it's killed, whereas that's something that could benefit people around the city. So when you have a housing crisis in New York City, this is the argument for the charter to vote for the ballot provisions from City Hall. The housing crisis is so serious that you can't have the same level of hoops that need to be jumped through.
Are people paying attention to this? Because I feel like a lot of these proposals, people turn them over and just vote yes. And so that's what the mayor was banking on to happen here. What do you think?
I think your theory is absolutely correct. I've talked to council members that are ardently opposed to this that have privately told me that it's probably going through. Because,
and they put mailers out.
Yeah, you turn the ballot over, you think about your rent, you think about how hard it was to find your apartment, and you're like, more housing, more housing, more housing. And I think it's widely expected that these pass, even though they are somewhat controversial in political circles. Your John Q. public voter is going to look at this and say, more housing. Done.
What you said, the city council has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars sending out these mailers to push against it. They had their own charter review commission that got bumped because of City Hall. But the other ballot is the number 6 question, which would change voting to having presidential. We'd all vote at the same time, which I'm not telling anyone how to vote, but as a reporter, if we're all tired now, imagine.
Gotta leave it there. Gotta leave it there. We'll be right back, everybody. Sorry. And that'll do it for us here on a very busy episode. I'll see you Tuesday night starting at 8 p.m. for our streaming coverage. For now, I'm Dan Mannarino. Have a good night.